The sound of the cake falling echoed through the luxurious hall. Nathaniel, with heavy breathing and wide, terrified eyes, looked at what he had just done. The large white cake, with layers of golden cream and delicate flowers, was now spread across the floor. He could barely process it. He had run there to grab something to eat, but panic took over. The guests' cameras were filming, and the bride, stunned, stood frozen. The guests whispered, and the silence that followed was deafening. He couldn't understand what was happening. I just wanted to eat, he thought, but the words didn't come out. He was in a state of panic. The event organizer, Mr. Bennett, a man with over 40 years of experience, didn't rush to call security. He didn't shout. From a distance, he observed the boy, dirty and in torn clothes, cornered by the mistake he had made. Slowly, he approached. With a calmness that contrasted with the chaos around, Mr. Bennett looked at the boy and simply but intensely said, "If you're going to destroy something, at least learn to do it right." What seemed like an irreversible mistake turns into something that changes everything. If you're curious to discover how, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. This is just the beginning of a transformation story. The large hall was in complete silence, except for the muffled sound of the cake falling. Nathaniel couldn't understand what had just happened. He looked at the pieces scattered on the floor, the golden flowers mixed with the white cream, and thought it looked like a nightmare. It wasn't a nightmare. It was real, and he had done it. The perfect party had turned into chaos, but he couldn't move. He couldn't leave. He was stuck there, at the center of everyone's gaze. Panic paralyzed him. He knew he didn't have the right to be there. He was a homeless boy. He wasn't on any list. He had no value. Just another invisible face on the streets of New York like so many others. Nathaniel looked around, searching for an exit, but all he saw were stunned and disapproving faces. A woman in a red dress looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Her eyes, once warm, now distant. He felt like he was sinking. The music abruptly stopped, and the heat in his cheeks increased, mixed with the cold shame that took over him. How had he ended up here? What was he doing? The answer seemed distant, impossible to find, but something inside him still burned, something that made him lift his eyes and face the man walking towards him. It was Mr. Bennett, the event organizer, who seemed to be in two places at once. He had calm eyes, but something in his gaze showed he wasn't at all satisfied with what had just happened. But contrary to what Nathaniel expected, the man didn't shout, didn't lose his composure. He came closer and in a serene tone said, "If you're going to ruin something, at least learn to do it right." Nathaniel froze. What did he mean by that? What would he do with that broken boy at his feet? For a moment, Nathaniel thought the answer would come in the form of a punch, or maybe an order to call the police. But nothing like that happened. Mr. Bennett observed him as though seeing something beyond a simple mistake. He didn't seem angry, just curious. Nathaniel didn't know what to do. He could hardly understand why the man was being so calm, but it made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, even if it was a small, almost imperceptible hope. Something inside told him that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance here. The chaos around him started to calm down. People resumed talking, the murmur of indignation decreased, and conversations continued as if nothing had happened. But Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was being evaluated. He looked at Mr. Bennett expecting some sort of reaction. The event organizer then spoke again, with a softer tone, but still firm. "I don't usually give second chances, but what you did, as wrong as it was, can still be used. You have potential. I want to see what you can do now." Mr. Bennett's gaze, which had been unmoved before, was now filled with a mystery Nathaniel didn't understand. The boy didn't know how to respond. At that moment, he didn't even know what he wanted. He only knew he was there, completely lost, and somehow, that man was offering him a chance. A chance for what? He looked around, feeling the weight of expectations. What could he do to fix what he had just destroyed? And more importantly, who was he to think he could be part of this world of luxury, of perfection, that was now watching him with a look of mixed curiosity and condemnation? There was no turning back, but the fear consumed him. He knew his life would never be the same. Suddenly, Mr. Bennett's voice cut through the silence. "I'll give you a chance to fix this, kid. Come with me. But know this, from now on, things won't be easy." And what happens here will change not only your life, but everyone around you. Nathaniel swallowed hard. He didn't know what to expect, but he felt a chill run down his spine. He was about to take a step with no turning back. But at the same time, a small spark of courage arose in his chest. He knew that this was, perhaps, the only opportunity of his life. The moment he started following Mr. Bennet, his eyes met the bride's gaze, who was watching from a distance. She seemed to be wondering what would happen to the boy who had ruined her perfect wedding. But in that exchange of glances, there was something more. There was doubt, compassion, a trace of understanding he had never seen before. She knew something had changed, but didn't know what. Nathaniel didn't know either, but he was about to find out. The large hall was back in operation, but the tension hadn't completely dissipated. Nathaniel found himself being led by Mr. Bennet to a small room at the back of the elegant building, a break room for the staff. He looked around at the simple furniture, the polished wooden floor, and the pictures on the walls, but none of it attracted him. What he wanted, really, was to understand what was happening. Why was he here? Why had Mr. Bennet decided to give him a chance, instead of simply kicking him out or calling the police? The event organizer sat down in one of the chairs and motioned for Nathaniel to do the same. There was no hurry, no shouting, just an unyielding calm surrounding him. Nathaniel, still not knowing what to say, sat beside Mr. Bennet, his hands sweaty and trembling from nerves. He couldn't stop wondering, what happens next? "I saw you out there," Mr. Bennet said, his voice soft but authoritative. "What you did wasn't right, but you have something. Something that's not easy to find. And that I can work with." Nathaniel looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "I see what others don't see. You have an energy, a strength that could be useful if you know how to use it right. I don't usually give second chances to anyone, but you caught my attention." Mr. Bennet paused, assessing Nathaniel as if deciding what the next step should be. "Today was a mistake, of course, but somehow, you did something that wasn't entirely useless. The event will still go on, and you will be part of it, but in a different way." Nathaniel didn't know whether to be more confused or scared. What was Mr. Bennet suggesting? Could he really help him? Was it possible that the homeless boy, who spent his days on the streets of Brooklyn, could actually enter this world of luxury? He looked at Mr. Bennet, trying to find some answer, but the man seemed to have more questions than answers. "I want you to stay here until the end of the night," Mr. Bennet said, breaking the silence. "I'm going to give you a task. A simple task, but important. You're going to help me with the organization of the event. It's not much, but it's enough to see if you have what it takes to stay." Nathaniel felt the weight of those words. What did stay mean? Stay in the world he had always seen from the outside? Stay inside something bigger than himself? Before he could process this, Mr. Bennet stood up and grabbed a notepad from the table. "Now, you'll follow Grace, my assistant. She'll show you what needs to be done. I'll need you to ensure everything goes perfectly. Nothing can go wrong now." Nathaniel didn't know what to make of this. He looked at Mr. Bennet, then at Grace, a woman with piercing eyes and short hair, who watched him with an unreadable expression. She seemed more like a shadow than a person, but her presence was undeniable. Grace gestured for Nathaniel to follow her. Without another word, he did. The backstage area seemed even more impressive than the main hall. There was a constant bustle of people, all perfectly dressed, all working in perfect synchronization. Nathaniel felt the weight of responsibility, but also a strange sense of belonging. Every step he took made him feel more distant from what he knew, but closer to something he never imagined he could be a part of. Grace, however, didn't seem inclined to make any concessions. "This is no place for mistakes," she said, her voice firm but not aggressive. "I don't know why you're here, but I'll give you a chance. Don't ruin it." Nathaniel felt a chill down his spine. He knew any wrong move could mean the end of his brief opportunity, but something inside him refused to give up. He couldn't go back to the street. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. As the night went on, Nathaniel found himself absorbed in the frantic pace of the event organization. He arranged chairs, restocked drinks, and even helped serve dishes to the guests. Each task seemed trivial, but he felt something more in every one of them. He was observing, learning, absorbing everything he could. What was Mr. Bennet trying to do? What did he really want from him? Nathaniel had no answers, but he knew he couldn't fail. Not after everything he was seeing, everything he was discovering. The chance was there within reach, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. By the end of the night, the event was over. The hall was empty, the lights began to dim, and the guests started to disperse. But Nathaniel didn't feel relief. Something else was about to happen. He felt a weight on his shoulders, a sense that the biggest challenge was yet to come. He didn't know what it would be, but something told him his life was about to change forever. And when he turned to Mr. Bennet, expecting an explanation, he saw that the man was no longer in the hall. Instead, Grace appeared, her expression serious and distant. She looked at Nathaniel with eyes that seemed to read his soul. "Do you think you're ready for the next step?" she asked, without hesitation. And in that moment, Nathaniel realized that the answer to that question could define the rest of his life. He swallowed hard, and before he could answer, Grace made a gesture he hadn't expected. "Come with me." Grace led him to an even more secluded area of the venue. What appeared to be a simple secret corridor soon revealed itself to be a large storage room, with shelves and boxes stacked high. Everything was in complete silence, except for the sound of Nathaniel's own footsteps, now carrying the weight of an even greater responsibility. He didn't know what Grace wanted, but her look was clear. There was something there he needed to understand, something he hadn't realized yet. "You must be wondering what's going on," Grace finally said, not turning to face him. "But the answer isn't simple. Mr. Bennet sees something in you, and so do I. You think you're just a street kid, but somehow that doesn't define who you could be." She paused for a moment, almost as if giving him time to digest her words. Nathaniel was stunned. He never saw himself as someone with potential. He had never felt that way. Since he was young, he always felt he had no value, that he was invisible. But something in the way Grace spoke made him question everything he thought about himself. He didn't know if he should trust her, or if he was just deluding himself. "So, what do you want from me?" he asked, the doubt still present in his voice. Grace slowly turned, her gaze meeting his with a seriousness that made him feel small. "I want you to understand that there's more inside of you than you think. People don't see you, Nathaniel, but that doesn't mean you don't have something important to offer. What Mr. Bennet sees in you isn't just a mistake. He sees a new beginning." "I don't understand," he muttered. He didn't want to seem weak, but he was confused. How could someone like him, a dirty and forgotten boy, have anything of value? Grace didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to a table and grabbed something from inside a folder. When she turned around, there was a sheet of paper in her hands. She handed it to him with an unreadable expression. Nathaniel looked at the paper, not fully understanding what he was seeing. It was a contract. "This is the first step, Nathaniel. What you do now will determine your future," Grace said, looking him directly in the eyes. Nathaniel felt a wave of panic. What was happening? He knew nothing about contracts. He knew nothing about this world. The words on the paper scrambled in his mind, but there was one clear thing. He needed to decide. Fear tightened his chest, but something else was there too. The chance to change, to finally escape what he had always been, to become something he never imagined. Grace watched him in silence, waiting for a response. He knew he couldn't turn back, but the decision felt overwhelming. He wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand how all of this worked, but the contract was already there. All he needed to do was sign. "Sign it, Nathaniel," Grace said softly. "This is your path now. The path you choose here is not just for you, but for something bigger. You will decide who you want to be." He looked at her, and then back at the contract. He didn't know exactly what he was signing, but something inside him told him he needed to take this step. Something in his soul, something he had never heard before, was telling him to move forward. He took a deep breath, and with the pen on the table, he signed the contract. The sheet of paper felt light, but the weight of that decision was indescribable. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew that from that moment on, his life would never be the same. Something inside him had changed, and in that moment he felt like the real battle was just beginning. "Now it's too late to turn back," Grace said, with a slight smile that seemed more like a riddle than an act of kindness. "You're in, Nathaniel. Let's see what you can do." Suddenly, the sound of quick footsteps echoed down the corridor. Someone was approaching. Nathaniel felt a tightness in his chest. What more would he need to do? What else did they expect from him? But before he could form an answer, the door opened and a man appeared. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and his eyes were fixed on Nathaniel with an intensity that made him shrink back slightly. "So you're the boy," the man said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Mr. Bennett talked about you. I'll be curious to see what you're capable of." Nathaniel didn't know what to say, but something inside him reacted. The presence of the man was intimidating, but there was something more there. A curiosity, an expectation. He was being watched, judged, and for the first time in his life, it felt like someone's gaze had weight. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to respond to that look. The opportunity, now that he had it, had to be seized. The man gestured for him to follow. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He still had much to learn, but he felt like the path ahead was starting to reveal itself before his eyes. He followed the man, not looking back, knowing that what had happened here wasn't just a mistake he had made. It was something much bigger. As he walked away, Grace observed from a distance, her penetrating gaze following each of Nathaniel's steps. He still didn't know, but she knew. His story was just beginning. Nathaniel followed the man through the hallways. With every step he took, he felt the weight of being in a world completely different from what he knew. The sensation of being watched, of being the center of attention, made him uncomfortable, but at the same time, there was something mysterious and intriguing about it. The man in front of him, impeccably dressed and standing with a firm posture, seemed to be an important figure. His name was Charles Montgomery, and he was about to introduce Nathaniel to a world he never imagined existed. They arrived at a large room, more like an office of luxury, but with an air of exclusivity. The walls were adorned with expensive artwork, and the modern design furniture completed the environment. Charles sat behind a glass desk, his expression still serious. He looked at Nathaniel, who was standing, trying not to show his nervousness. "So," Charles said, his voice calm but authoritative, "what does Mr. Bennett see in you? He says you have potential." Nathaniel didn't know what to answer. He was still processing everything that was happening. He didn't feel special. He didn't feel worthy to be there. But Charles's gaze made him question if there was really something more to him. "I'm just a street kid," Nathaniel said, his voice low, as if trying to diminish the weight of what was happening. "I don't know what Mr. Bennett sees, and I don't know what I'm doing here." Charles smiled faintly, but it wasn't a mocking smile. It was a thoughtful expression, as though he had heard that many times before. "It's not about what you think you are. It's about what you can become. Mr. Bennett sees something in you that I can't see yet, but I will find out." He leaned forward, looking deeply into Nathaniel's eyes. "I see many people here. Some are sophisticated, others have money, but very few have something real, something that comes from within. And you, my friend, have that." Nathaniel felt a chill down his spine, but he didn't know how to react. He wanted to say he wasn't special, that he was just another lost kid, but somehow the words didn't come out. He looked at Charles, searching for any sign that he was being deceived, that all of this was a scam. But Charles's gaze was firm, and his words, no matter how enigmatic, seemed to be true. "You're here because Mr. Bennett believes in you," Charles continued. "But if you're going to be a part of this, you're going to have to work hard. It's not easy, and you'll need more than just your hands. You'll need your mind, your heart. Because here, Nathaniel, nothing is guaranteed." The boy sat down, his hands still trembling. He didn't know if he was more scared or more curious. He had always lived his life without expectations, without big dreams. But right then, something was changing inside him. He didn't know how, but he felt that he was at a turning point. He could no longer go back to the streets. This was his chance, and he knew he had to seize it. Charles kept talking, but Nathaniel barely heard him. He was lost in his own thoughts. He felt a huge pressure on his shoulders, a weight he had never felt before. But at the same time, there was a feeling of challenge, something that made him want more, even without fully understanding what was happening. "You have a rare opportunity," Charles said, interrupting his thoughts. "But to use it, you'll need to make hard decisions. The choices you make now will shape who you become. And I'm not just talking about being an event planner. I'm talking about something much bigger. Something that will change you in ways you can't even comprehend yet." Nathaniel looked at him, feeling the tension in the air. What was he saying? What else was at stake beyond what he already knew? Before he could ask, Charles stood up and moved closer to him. "Let's take the first step then," Charles said with a serious look. "But remember, once you enter this world, there's no turning back. You will become a part of it for better or for worse. The choice is yours." Nathaniel felt the weight of those words. He didn't know if he was ready for what was to come, but he knew he had no choice. He had signed the contract. He had taken the first step and there was no going back. When he left the room, with Grace by his side, the world outside seemed the same, but he knew nothing would ever be the same again. What would happen next? He had no idea, but something in his heart told him that something big was about to happen, something that could change his life in a way he never imagined. The last thing Nathaniel saw before leaving through the door was Charles's gaze, fixed on him, as if watching him with silent expectation. "Let's see what you're capable of," he had said, and Nathaniel knew without a doubt that that moment would be the first of many tests. In the following days, Nathaniel was incorporated into Mr. Bennett's team, working directly with Grace and the other event organizers. The work was hard, demanding, and full of details, but he was learning. Every space arrangement, every dish served, every forced smile he had to give the guests brought him closer to a world that once seemed impossible. But something else was happening to Nathaniel. He began to realize that no matter how tirelessly he worked, there was a gap between him and the others. Something no one told him, but he was beginning to understand. They didn't see him as one of us. He was still the street kid, the outsider. He didn't belong to the elite. And that, in some way, made him feel more and more out of place. One night, while organizing some documents for Mr. Bennett, Nathaniel overheard a conversation between Grace and Charles. It was a private discussion, but he was so close that he couldn't avoid hearing it. The tension in the air was palpable. "He has potential," Grace said, her voice low, "but it's not enough. The kid has will, but he lacks vision. Without vision, he can't go beyond what he already is." Charles sighed, a sound of frustration. "I know, but it's too late to go back. He made his choice. We can't stop now." He paused, as if weighing his words. "I thought it would be easier, but now I see we're dealing with something more complex. He's going to need to decide who he wants to be, what he wants to be." Nathaniel froze, Grace and Charles's words hitting him like a hammer. It was the truth he feared. He was no longer just a street kid. He was being shaped, transformed. But where would this lead him? What did decide who to be mean? When Grace saw him standing by the door, her expression was hard to read. She knew he had overheard them. "Are you ready to hear what comes next?" she asked, without hesitation. Nathaniel didn't know what to say. The fear was still there, but something inside him was pushing him to move forward. He knew he had to make the choice. He couldn't stay in limbo, between what he was and what he could be. He needed to know what he wanted for himself. "I need to know what this means for me," he said, his voice firm, but full of doubt. Grace looked at him for a moment, as if evaluating whether he was truly ready. Then, with a sigh, she spoke, finally revealing what he had always known but never wanted to admit. "You're not here just to be an event planner. You're here for something bigger. You're a key player, Nathaniel. The choices you make now will define much more than you imagine." Those words fell on him like a burden. What did she mean by something bigger? What more was there beyond the simple event planning he knew? But looking at her, he knew he could no longer ignore the truth. He was in something much bigger than he had originally thought. He wasn't just a substitute, a boy who was taking advantage of a chance. He was an essential part of something, of a web that was unfolding before him that he couldn't fully understand. That night, as the event was winding down and the guests began to disperse, Mr. Bennett called him to his office. Nathaniel entered, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. "I knew you would get here," Mr. Bennett said, looking at him with a serious expression. "You've already made a decision. You can settle for being just another one, or you can be what we need you to be." Nathaniel swallowed hard. The pressure on him was becoming unbearable. He looked at the man in front of him, the contractor who had given him a chance and was now expecting more, much more. "I don't know what this means," Nathaniel confessed, his voice low. "I just know that I want to do something more. I want to be more than just a street kid." Mr. Bennett smiled, but it wasn't a victorious smile. It was a smile of understanding. "Then you already know what you need to do. The only question that remains, Nathaniel, is, do you have the courage to do it?" Nathaniel looked at him, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. He knew what was at stake. He knew this opportunity could change his life. He didn't want to be invisible anymore. He didn't want to be just a boy. He wanted to be someone who made a difference. "I'm ready," he said, his voice now strong and clear, stronger than he ever thought it could be. Mr. Bennet stood up and handed him a folder. Inside was the key to a new future, a key that he didn't know exactly what it would open. But one thing was certain: he was about to take a step that would change everything. "Welcome to your new path," Mr. Bennet said. And with those words, Nathaniel knew his life would never be the same. Nathaniel had an opportunity. And you? Do you believe an opportunity can change someone's story? If this moment touched you, leave a comment below and share what you would do if you were Nathaniel. Stay now for another emotional story.